Hello and welcome. Today is Monday, September 5th, and football is literally right around the corner. When it comes to this week, there are some interesting matchups. Overall, it's going to be hopefully a pretty exciting week one. If it's anything based off of what college has been for week one, then hopefully it should be a really exciting atmosphere. This past weekend when it came to college games, there were some blowouts, obviously, but then there was also some amazing shootouts and then just some amazing good games in general. For example, while it was a defensive battle, Iowa beating San Diego State 7-3 was very exciting. I'm sure it was exciting for San Diego State fans to be close the whole game, but obviously they ended up losing, so it's whatever. And then another game that was really fun on the opposite end was like UNC Appalachian State that finished I want to say it's like 65-63 or 66-64, something like that. And they basically gave up 35 in the fourth quarter. UNC did, and then Appalachian came back. Basically, and they almost won it. And then the Purdue game, I think that was on Thursday, was really fun. So, it was a really good week one of the college football, and it was a great little taste of what's potentially about to come with the NFL coming up now. So, when it comes for this week of games, I basically tiered all the games to importance, where tier one are the games are basically can't miss and you must. It's basically like a must see because they're going to be the best primetime games that are on. And then when it comes to Tier 2, those are the games that are about middle level. That you definitely probably want to check in, but you could maybe get away with not watching. And there'll be Tier 3 that are games where basically should be one-sided affairs. So to start out, I'll start out with the bottom tier, just to kind of get these out of the way. So basically Tier 3, these are all the games that, like I said, there's not much to expect for. There'll probably be, obviously it's the NFL, there'll be some storylines that come out of it, but for the most part, these are the games that are probably going to be one-sided, if anything. So, that's not necessarily true. Some of these games, they won't be one-sided necessarily either, but they aren't. It's just going to be, there's not as much to get out of it, I guess, as there are the other games. So to start out, these aren't by no order either. I just kind of wrote them down as I went down the schedules. So the first one is the Saints-Falcons. The only reason I have this in Tier 3 is, it's just going to be interesting to see what Jameis does. The Saints are semi-young, but they still have a pretty good defense. They still have some veterans, and then the Falcons are a team that's looking to go in the new direction. And when it comes to this game probably isn't going to be as entertaining as some of the other games on the list, just because, it's just, while this game does have potential to be a good game, it's just between the Saints and Falcons. It's just those are two teams that potentially, where the Saints might sneak into a playoff spot this year, the Falcons probably won't, and there's nothing against this game. This is probably one of the better ones out of the Tier 3 games, but it was basically, I would say this is a borderline Tier 2 game, but basically there's not too much to come out of it, except it's going to be, basically it's just kind of a taste of what the Saints possibly could be, and just more of what are the Falcons going to be. The next one is the 49ers-Bears. This one, sorry Bears fans, but this one, Justin Fields probably going to be running for his life most of the game. The 49ers could easily have 10-12 sacks this game. And this is a game that the 49ers basically have no business losing. They should easily handle the Bears. It's the NFL though, so anything could happen. But the Bears are just, I feel taking off this year, basically trying to look forward to next year when they have all the money and they have a chance to get some big names. And it's just basically a trial year to see what they got. So I don't expect too much out of the Bears. Basically, it's just more of it's going to be an interesting game to see how Justin Fields does and kind of get a gauge at maybe some of who the players are. Because, overall, that Bears offense is probably going to be pretty boring at points. And, the 49ers should be able to beat them pretty easily. When it comes to the next game, it's the Baltimore versus the Jets. And this is kind of the same as the last game where Baltimore should easily handle the Jets, especially with no Zach Wilson. There's a rumor now. There's a report out that he's practicing a little bit and he might be back for Sunday. But, regardless, I don't think they want to rush him back to begin with. So, I would... Probably, if I had to guess, we'd probably be seeing Joe Flacco. And if we see Joe Flacco, it's Joe Flacco. He didn't win a Super Bowl, but those were a few years ago. And, the Jets are the Jets, and Baltimore's looking to potentially be a division winner this year. So, Baltimore should probably handle this game pretty easily. And other than the fact about the whole Lamar Jackson situation, what's going on with this, this game should be, pretty easy. Baltimore should handle the Jets, I would think. For next game, it's Jacksonville, Washington. Just saying those names of those franchises itself, that's kind of why it's in the Tier 3. These are two teams that kind of trying to find the direction for themselves. And, no offense to the Jags or Washington, but, they're just, after last year, they both had very distracting last year's is the best way to put it, with just stuff that was going on behind the scene and everything. And now this year they're basically trying to just take a step forward and forget everything that's basically happened. But it's going to be Trevor Lawrence, definitely. I think the highlight of this game is probably going to be like Trevor Lawrence. It's going to be interesting to see now that like ETN's back. Now they don't have Urban Meyer for the distractions and everything. Because honestly, last year was probably like the first time in a while, and I wouldn't say the history of the NFL, but a long, long time that like the number one pick wasn't even like talked about at all. I mean, he basically like there was like occasional like, oh, Trevor Lawrence here and that, this and there, but I mean for the most part it was the Urban Meyer show. What was going on with Urban Meyer? So because of that, the number one overall pick didn't get much talk about. And yeah, so I mean Jacksonville's definitely looking to take a step up this year. They've tried to clean it up a little bit. They signed Christian Kirk. I mean, but they had the number one overall draft pick again. And the Commanders got like Carson Wentz. And they re-signed Terry McLaurin. But I mean, these are two teams that are probably like potential like bottom feeders in their divisions, and they're just trying to basically come up with something and figure out something for them. But when it comes to this game, yeah, I honestly truly don't know what's going to happen. I mean, this is just more of let's see what Trevor Lawrence can do and what let's see what Trevor Lawrence can do and what Carson Wentz looks like on his new team. And for the last level of Tier 3, I have the Titans and Giants. No offense to either of these teams, but they're like kind of like boring teams. I mean, the Titans obviously have Derrick Henry, and he's a lot of fun. And the Giants have Saquon Barkley, who's also a pretty good running back. But I mean, other than that, I mean, these two teams are just like, I don't know. I mean, these are two teams that, when it comes to the Titans and Giants, I mean, there's just a game that probably won't be like too fun to watch. Derrick Henry could potentially like run all over the Giants. The Giants' offense could be abysmal. The Titans' offense could also be abysmal. I mean, this is a game where there's a lot of factors in the air that's going to be like interesting to like just see what happens between the two. I mean, the Titans are looking to clean up a little bit after what happened last year, where in the playoffs and everything. But without A.J. Brown and with some of the changes they're making and potentially looking to make as the season goes, it's just going to be this basically. I mean, if I had to pick, I would assume the Titans would beat the Giants, but the Giants are looking to take a change of direction too. I mean, they finished pretty bad last year, and they potentially are looking at flipping the script. They have a new offensive coordinator. They have some new pieces on offense. Saquon's back healthy, and this is probably the best situation he's seen in his few years there. So there's hope potentially that the Giants might be able to do something, but until they prove it, I mean, they're one of the worst teams in the NFL, and they just continue to be until they want to change it. So now when it comes to, this is Tier 2 games, I think these are the games that like, these games are definitely like a little interesting. I mean, there's some division battles in here, and then these are just matchups where there's some potential cool things to see with like some new players and new teams and whatnot too. So like for example, one of the games is Pittsburgh versus Cincinnati. That's gonna be interesting to see just like who's gonna be a quarterback. Did just get announced today, I believe, that Mr. Trubisky is a captain for the Steelers. So I'm assuming based on that he's gonna probably start. So it's probably gonna be Mitchell Trubisky versus Joe Burrow, and it's just going to be interesting to see what the Steelers now look like without Ben Roethlisberger for the first time in how many years. Because, I mean, he's been at the helm for a while now, and, I mean, they finished last year basically, like, celebrating him. I know they made the playoffs and everything, but basically it was kind of like Big Ben's last ride. That's all of what basically last year was. So now moving this season, it's all about the new guys. It's a whole new change for everyone, basically. And when it comes to Cincinnati, they were just in the Super Bowl. They look to take another step up this year, too, so potentially they could be just as good, if not better, than they were last year. So it's going to be fun to see the quarterback battle in that game, and just it's going to be fun to take a look at, can the Bengals continue off what they did last year, and can the Steelers basically, like, what are they going to be this year? The next game, this is another division battle. It's New England versus Miami. There's been so many rumors out of, like, the New England camp and everything about how basically about the offensive coordinator, Bill Belichick this, Bill Belichick that, and how they haven't been playing as good. There's a lot of noise coming around New England potentially as like they're going to be in trouble this year, and that they just don't have it anymore. Versus Miami, I mean, there's been a lot more hype around them now because they got Tua paired up with Jalen Waddle, and now Tyreek Hill, who just got added. So there's a lot of hype around this team, obviously, but I mean, they're still the Miami Dolphins. They're still a lot of people who are out on Tua are just like not as intrigued as Tua as others are. So it's going to be an interesting battle to see like how Tua does now that basically like this is his best situation. So basically he has to go to prove that's his job to keep. And then when it comes to the Patriots, it's just going to be interesting to see who they are this year. I mean, it's slowly. I mean, they had a pretty good year last year with Mac Jones, but I mean, with all the drama behind it, the scenes and everything, it's still Bill Belichick, so I'm sure they'll be okay. But it's going to be interesting to see now, like, what they do with this roster that they have, because this roster does seem to be a little weaker than, I mean, the years past. But overall, I mean, it's still the Patriots, like I said. So you can't count out Bill Belichick, but it is going to be interesting to see if there's going to be some movement in this division now, because Miami did improve a little bit, and the Jets improved a little. But I mean, they're still the Jets, so they're probably going to be down there. But basically, assuming the Bills just win the division, then this is a spot between the Dolphins and the Patriots for number 2, and potentially that second spot could end up in the playoffs. So this is going to be a big game week 1 to basically see who's going to take like the first steps in the right direction for the division, and just basically get a feeling out for who each of these teams might be this year. Now, another divisional game is the Colts versus Texans. I mean, this one, the Colts are favored by 8. This would probably be a rout if I had to guess, and the Colts should... maybe not a rout, but the Colts should win this game. Yeah, the Colts should win this game. I mean, on both sides, though, Dameon Pierce has been getting a lot of hype around the Houston Texans, and even in the fantasy world, like, there's a lot of hope around that this guy will be pretty good. And then there's also, they want to see how Davis Mills is going to do in year 2. There's a lot of things around how they want to maybe build the team around him and everything. So if potentially he does all right this year, then there's a chance that he might be the man in Houston for a while. And when it comes to Indianapolis in this game, it's just more of like, who are they? Because I mean, last year was probably pretty embarrassing, one of the most embarrassing times as Colts fans, because they had 2 games where all they had to do was win, and they were in the playoffs, and somehow they couldn't win either of them, and one of them was against the team in Jacksonville who ended up with the first pick that year. So, and the Colts didn't look in that game at all to begin with, that final game. So whatever it is, like, Carson's gone now, Matt Ryan's in. It's gonna be interesting to see if, like, was Carson Wentz the issue behind this team, or maybe is it somebody in the higher ups or whatnot. I think the Colts have a pretty good chance. Like, they probably should win this division based on how good their team is. And if Matt Ryan can be as good as he can be, or as good as he's shown even, that, like, the Colts are going to have a really good chance to do some damage in the playoffs. But for the most part, yeah, it's going to be week 1. I mean, the big questions around the, like, receiving core and everything. They lost one of their 6'7" tight ends, who was a younger guy, but he was looking to be promising. So and with an already, like, kind of thin receiver room compared to, like, what other teams have, it's going to be interesting. I mean, the Colts I thought they would pick up T.Y. Hilton back by now, and they still haven't got him, so that's really shocking. And then they still haven't picked up a veteran receiver either. And they almost seem like they're okay with the guys they got, which if they're really good, then that's awesome. I can't wait to see it. But just not having at least one veteran wide receiver in that room, it just feels interesting. So, I mean, also they have Jonathan Taylor and a really good offensive line, like I said, with a really good defense. So when it comes to this game, it's just going to be interesting to see, like, what does Matt Ryan look like in an Indianapolis uniform, and then it's going to be fun for the Texans, I guess, to see if Dameon Pierce is worth the hype, and then also how they do in the division this year, because this is going to be a fun game to see basically how each team is looking this year, because each team has expectations of they should do. For the Texans, it comes to where they should win at least a few games, but they potentially have the chance to be the worst team in the league. So it's just going to be, can they fight? Can the Texans fight and potentially, like, make it tough games for everyone out? And then for the Colts, it's can they win this game and then potentially show that, hey, we are a playoff team? Another game, this one isn't a division, but it's basically a matchup of 2 playoff teams. It's going to be Kansas City versus Arizona. This is going to be an interesting game just to see, like, how Patrick Mahomes does without Tyreek Hill for the first time. And also just going to be interesting to see how Arizona does basically on their bounce back from the playoffs. Both of these teams lost in the playoffs basically, like, in kind of devastating fashion. Obviously, when it comes to the Chiefs, they lost by a field goal in the championship game, and they were looking pretty good. I mean, they almost could have won that game, but they ended up not. And then for the Cardinals, they just completely fell apart in that playoff games against the Rams, and it looked really, really bad for Kyler. When it comes to the Arizona Cardinals, I mean, this is going to be a really tough game for both sides. I mean, the Chiefs probably are going to end up winning this game just because they're the Chiefs and they play really, really good. And then when it comes to, like, kind of the big game, especially, like, without DeAndre Hopkins, and there's a rumor now Rondale Moore might be out week 1 potentially. I mean, there's a lot going on with the Cardinals right now where it feels like this could be scary times for them. I mean, they started off last year 7-1, so they can come out hot again. And there's not saying that they're a bad team by any means, but it's just after that playoff scare what they showed in that playoff game, I mean, it kind of was eye-opening to me that how badly they got beat down, and it just has me a little bit scared Now, mind you, the Kansas City defense probably is not as good as the Rams was, but I mean, regardless, still, I mean, the fact of the way they played, it's just going to be a fun game. It's going to be a fun game regardless. It's going to be Patrick Mahomes versus Kyler Murray, so this game has the potential to be a shootout, and then this game also has potential to be like maybe a like 21-17 win. So it's just going to be fun to see. It's a battle of two playoff teams, and it's just going to be interesting to see what both teams basically, how each team starts the season. When it comes to, and then there's another game, it's Philly-Detroit. That's going to be interesting just because like Philly has so much hype around them right now, and basically the same. I mean, Detroit does kind of too, but in like the opposite way. It's like for Philly, they just got AJ Brown, and this is basically like the year where everyone wants to see what Jalen Hurts can do. Because I mean, this is Jalen. I mean, the Eagles are set to go. They have a really good squad, and a lot of people are picking them like to win the division and everything. They're almost being like so talked about and so like excited about that. It's potentially, I don't know if they can even be considered like a sleeper anymore for the division. I mean, it's basically between them and the Cowboys when it comes to the division. The other two teams don't look like they're going to be that competitive this year. So it's going to come down to, can the Cowboys do it or can the Eagles do it? And when it comes to the Eagles playing Detroit, I mean, this is a good game for them to show that, hey, we are this team and that we want to go and that we're ready to go. And they come out and handle Detroit week 1. As for Detroit, they just have a lot of hype around them because this is like the second year with Dan Campbell. And I mean, last year they had a few games where they literally could have won. Like, they could have been a 6 or 7 win team potentially, but instead they were a 3-win team, and they looked a lot better down the stretch towards the end of the season. So there's a lot of hype when it comes to the Lions. I mean, this potentially is a team that could sneak into the playoffs, or they're the Lions where they could be god awful. I mean, it's really like there's so much question marks around this team. So, and kind of the same with the Eagles. There's question marks. Are they this good? Are they going to be that good? So this is just going to be a fun, interesting game to see like what each team kind of looks like, and is the hype really real behind either of them. And the second last for Tier 2 is the Chargers-Raiders. This is hopefully this is basically a rematch of the last week game last year for who was going to go into the playoffs. And the Chargers, they definitely got some upgrades this year. The Raiders got some upgrades too. So it's going to be a really fun battle. I mean, the Chargers probably should win that game, but I mean, they are the Chargers. So I mean, there's no saying that they will or not, but it's just going to be a fun game regardless because Derek Carr gets his old buddy and Devontae Adams back, so that pairing tandem is going to be pretty good. And both sides have really good offenses. So, I mean, Justin Herbert, I would want to say, is a little bit better than Derek Carr, so I would like to lean towards the Chargers in that matchup, but it's going to be interesting. I mean, when it comes to this game, I see it basically as the Chargers, I feel like, should win by at least like a field goal. With all the upgrades they have on defense, they should be able to get enough stops, but being a division game, anything can happen. So it's just going to be a fun, good old division game to start out week 1 with two teams that are really good and both looking to head in the right direction. Because, I mean, when it comes to the way this division's going to look, I mean, you really need as many wins as you can get. So any division game is basically like critical and almost like a playoff game because, yeah, the AFC West is insane. And then the final game will be the Sunday night. I believe this is a Sunday night game. It's the Bucs versus Cowboys. I mean, this game, I mean, it's not. It's kind of like last year's where it's like probably the Bucs I think should have covered and they didn't, but they ended up winning or whatever still. And what's gonna be interesting about this game is just all the storylines that are like outside this game that comes into it. Like there's so much Brady left for the few days. I mean, all the injuries with the Bucs and this and that, new head coach, new this, new that. It's gonna be interesting to see like what this team is and who they are and what they can do. And then for the Cowboys, it's like, oh, Amari's gone. Is Zeke going to be okay? Tony Pollard's going to take a step up. Is Dak really him? Like, for both these teams, there's so many questions, but for so many different things that it's kind of interesting. There's a lot of doubt creeping in, especially on the Broncos. Excuse me. There's some doubt creeping in the Bucs now too, because a lot of teams are like, well, he is 45, and while Brady didn't do bad last year. I mean, he left. He did something unprecedented. Seems like there's a lot of noise going on to where it makes a lot of people skeptical of the Bucs. And then when it comes to the Cowboys, it's the same thing. Like, there's a lot of people skeptical of the coach. There's rumors that Mike McCarthy might be the first coach fired, potentially, like, in betting sites. I think he's leading the props. So when it just comes to, it's just going to be, with all that coming outside, it's going to make for a really good Sunday night game where both these teams definitely need a win to head in the right direction. And now finally, this is the Tier 1 of games where basically these are the games that, like, you are probably going to want to tune into because they're definitely going to have the best action, it seems like, and they have the most meaning behind them, in my opinion. So, like, for the first one, it'll obviously be the Thursday night game against the Rams and Bills. not only is this like a potential Super Bowl matchup in Week 1, but I mean it's the first game of the NFL season, so you don't want to miss it because of all the fireworks and everything. And these are just two really good teams. That Bills are everyone's favorite to win the Super Bowl, but they still have to prove it. And then the Rams are the defending champs that not everyone thinks they can get back there. So this is basically, it's going to be a really fun battle of two really, really good teams. Why the Rams are not favored, that kind of shocks me. I thought they would be favored at home since they are defending Super Bowl champs, but the Bills are favored in that case. So, I mean, it's going to be a really, really fun game. There's going to be a lot of stars on the field, and it's just going to be a great way to open up this NFL season. As for the next game, it's going to be a revenge game at 1 o'clock on Sunday. It's the Panthers versus Cleveland. Now, most years, Carolina Panthers or Cleveland Browns probably doesn't mean much to anyone. This year it's going to be really interesting because now the whole Baker thing that might have been blown out of proportion a little bit about how he said he's going to fuck them up. And then it's Jacoby Brissett versus Baker, so it's not that exciting. But the whole Baker-Cleveland, if this thing could be amazing if it was Baker returning to Cleveland. But sadly, Cleveland's coming to Carolina. So regardless, though, it's going to be a fun matchup between the Panthers and Browns. It's going to be some fun to see basically Baker take on his former team and how his former team takes on him, because neither side really wants to lose that game, because there's a lot. While either side might not say much about it publicly, there's definitely so much pride behind it, because you don't want to be the one who was wrong in that situation. So it's just going to be a fun battle between two potentially like interesting teams for this year. And then there's two more games when it comes. Another game that's going to be interesting. That's a division battle that it's going to be really good, and a really important game is the Packers and Vikings. These last few years, the Vikings have basically lost the big game when it matters to the Packers. Like later in the season, that's basically why they haven't won the division the past few years. Minus Packers also being really good. So this game being a Week 1 game in Minnesota, I mean, this is a huge, huge game for Minnesota. Like, this is a game they should steal against the Packers. Like, if they want to get where they're going, they should be able to do this. But, I mean, with Aaron Rodgers still at the helm for the Packers, it's going to be interesting to see, like, how he plays and how they do. Because, I mean, basically, like, this game is kind of like, this is basically the battle for the division almost, because between the Lions and Bears, they probably aren't going to win it. So if the Vikings can win this first game, then that could give them a lot of momentum and potential hype for playing the Packers later on and potentially winning the division. And the same goes for the Packers. So, I mean, it's just going to be an exciting Week 1 game. I mean, either side could honestly win this game, so it's going to be fun to see who comes out on top. In the final game for Tier 1, it's going to be the Monday night game to round it out. It's going to be Mr. Let's Ride himself, Russell Wilson, against his former team in Seattle. This game, hopefully, there's potential that, like, there's the rumors that this could end up being, like, a meh game. It's probably not going to be that fun, but there's a lot of people who have been down on Russell Wilson, saying he's not the same as he was years ago and this and that. Well, no, that might be true and everything. I mean, I truly think that potentially this could be a huge breakout year for him. He just got some money, which is good, and then also he just basically gets a whole new scenery with coaches that kind of want to embrace him. And that Denver, I mean, you saw what they did with Peyton. I mean, the Colts basically had to get rid of Peyton. I mean, with everything that was going on and all that. As much as it hurt and as bad as it was, I don't like the way they did it, but it kind of had to happen. Then he goes to Denver, kind of gets control from Elway, where Elway kind of lets him, like, take control of the building and do, like, this and that with some of the players, and then, boom, they win a Super Bowl, and he looks really good. And I think the similar thing kind of happened with Elway back in the day. So, I mean, when it comes now, it's Russell Wilson's turn. He comes into Denver, and, I mean, they're changing the offense to where they're going to let him maybe throw it a little bit more, have a little bit more control. So it's going to be really, really fun to see how Russell Wilson does with this new team. When it comes to Seattle, I mean, what do they look like now without Russell Wilson? Geno Smith is a starter, and there's rumors they're going to be one of the worst teams potentially in the NFL. There's also rumors they could be one of the dogfighty teams that make you, like, play long games with them. Regardless, this is going to be a fun game. It's Russell Wilson returning. This is what the Cleveland Panthers game should have been. It's Russell Wilson returning to his former home, and it's going to be just a fun matchup. Now with that, I mean, that's basically all the Week 1 games. I mean, it's going to be a really, really fun week. I mean, NFL is right around the corner, and it's just finally exciting that after a long summer and a long off season that football is basically here, and we are 3 days away from kickoff.